The crack of splintering wood echoed across the vast Texas plain as Fiona Garrett's wagon wheel struck a hidden crevice, sending her prized possessions tumbling across the dusty floor. October 1875 had brought an early chill to the frontier, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in crimson hues, Fiona realized with mounting dread that she was stranded miles from Fort Worth with night rapidly approaching. "Steady now," she whispered to her agitated mare, her gloved hand stroking the animal's chestnut neck. The horse whinnied nervously, stomping its hooves against the hard-packed earth. Fiona's green eyes scanned the growing shadows, her breath catching in her throat as she caught the first haunting howl riding the wind. Wolves. At 22, Fiona had faced her share of hardships since leaving Boston 3 months prior. Her parents' passing had left her with nothing but debts, and a letter from her mother's cousin in Fort Worth offering sanctuary and work at her millinery shop. The journey west had depleted her meager savings, and now, with her wagon axle shattered beyond repair, Fiona feared she might never reach her destination. The temperature dropped swiftly as darkness fell. Fiona gathered what wood she could find and struck a match with trembling fingers. The small fire offered little comfort as the howls grew closer, more insistent. Her father's old revolver lay heavy in her lap, though she doubted her ability to fend off an entire pack with the 3 remaining bullets. From the corner of her eye, she caught the first flash of movement, a shadow slinking between the scrub brush yellow eyes reflecting her pitiful fire. Then another, and another. "Dear God," she whispered, raising the pistol with both hands. The first wolf emerged fully from the darkness, its silver-gray coat shimmering in the firelight. It approached cautiously, head low, muscles coiled beneath its fur. Fiona aimed, knowing she needed to make every shot count. The crack of a rifle split the night, causing Fiona to jolt. The wolf yelped and darted away. 3 more shots followed in rapid succession, scattering the pack into the darkness. "Don't move, miss," a deep voice called from beyond the firelight. "They'll be back." A man on horseback materialized from the shadows, rifle raised to his shoulder. Without lowering his weapon, he urged his palomino closer, the horse's breath forming small clouds in the chill air. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes never leaving the darkness surrounding them. Fiona shook her head, finding her voice. "No, sir, just stranded. My axle." "Name's Adam Vance," he interrupted, sliding from his saddle with practiced ease. He was tall, with broad shoulders beneath a worn leather duster. His face, partially shadowed by his hat, revealed a strong jaw darkened with stubble. "We need a bigger fire." "They won't come too close to flames they can't jump over." Adam worked quickly, gathering sage and deadwood from the surrounding area. He moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to the dangers of the frontier. Fiona watched as he built the fire higher, the increased light revealing more of his features, piercing blue eyes beneath a furrowed brow, a small scar cutting through his right eyebrow. "You're a long way from anywhere, madam," he said, finally meeting her gaze directly. "Fiona Garrett," she replied, extending her hand. "I'm headed to Fort Worth. My mother's cousin owns a millinery shop there." Adam took her hand briefly, his calloused palm rough against her skin. "Madeline Fleming's place." Fiona's eyes widened. "Yes, you know her." "Everyone knows everyone in Fort Worth," he replied, a ghost of a smile crossing his features. "It's still a day's ride from here." He glanced at her broken wagon. "And you won't be making it in this." The howling resumed, closer now, and Adam's hand moved instinctively to his rifle. "They're persistent tonight, likely hungry with winter coming on." He checked his ammunition. "I'll stand guard. You should try to get some rest, Miss Garrett. Dawn's a long way off." "I couldn't possibly sleep," Fiona protested, even as exhaustion weighed on her shoulders. "I'll keep you safe," Adam said simply, as if making a statement of fact rather than a promise. Something in his quiet confidence eased the tightness in Fiona's chest. She arranged her blankets near the fire, watching as Adam positioned himself with his back to the flames, his silhouette sharp against the night sky. "Why help me, Mr. Vance?" she asked softly. "You could have ridden past." Adam remained silent for a moment. "My mother raised me better than that," he finally replied. "Get some rest, Miss Garrett. Tomorrow will be a long day." Despite her protest, Fiona found herself drifting into an uneasy sleep, the rhythmic sound of Adam checking his rifle providing an odd comfort against the distant chorus of wolves. Throughout the night, Fiona woke several times to the sound of gunfire. Each time, Adam stood vigilant, reloading his weapon with steady hands. Once their eyes met across the fire, and he nodded reassuringly before returning his attention to the darkness. Dawn broke with merciful warmth, chasing away both the chill and the wolves. Fiona stirred from her makeshift bed, muscles aching from the hard ground. Adam sat on a nearby rock, hat pushed back on his head, looking as though he hadn't moved all night. "Good morning, Miss Garrett," he said, offering her a tin cup of coffee from his saddlebag supplies. "Thought you might need this." "Thank you," she murmured, accepting the steaming cup gratefully. The coffee was strong and bitter, nothing like the delicate blends she'd been accustomed to in Boston, but it warmed her from the inside out. "Did you sleep at all?" "I've gone longer without," he replied, standing to stretch his tall frame. "We should get moving. I can take you into Fort Worth on my horse. We'll have to leave most of your things, but we can send someone back for what's salvageable." Fiona glanced at her wagon, containing everything she owned in the world. "I can't just abandon it." Adam surveyed the broken axle. "It would take a day to repair properly, and we don't have the tools or parts." He hesitated, then added more gently, "Those wolves will be back tonight, Miss Garrett. I'd rather not push our luck a second time." The practicality of his words couldn't be denied. Fiona nodded reluctantly. "Let me gather what I can carry." She worked methodically, selecting her most precious possessions: her mother's silver hand mirror, the family Bible, a small portrait of her parents on their wedding day, and practical necessities like clothing and her remaining money sewn into a pocket of her petticoat. Everything else, the dishes, books, furniture she'd hoped would make a new home, would have to stay behind. Adam helped her secure her bundles to his horse, working silently but efficiently. When everything was ready, he offered his hand to help her mount. "Have you ridden astride before, Miss Garrett?" he asked. Fiona flushed slightly. "Not since I was a girl." "Well, side saddle won't work for where we're going," he said matter-of-factly. "I'll ride behind you." With as much dignity as she could muster, Fiona gathered her skirts and allowed Adam to boost her onto the saddle. The horse, a sturdy palomino named Solace, shifted beneath her unfamiliar weight but remained steady. Adam swung up behind her, his chest warm against her back as he reached around to take the reins. The proximity was shocking in Boston. Such contact would have been scandalous, but here, in the vast emptiness of the frontier, different rules applied. "Ready?" he asked, his breath stirring the wisps of auburn hair that had escaped her bonnet. "Yes," she answered, trying to ignore the strange flutter in her stomach at his closeness. They set out at a steady pace, the wagon growing smaller behind them until it disappeared from view entirely. Fiona couldn't help the pang of loss that swept through her. That wagon had carried her across rivers and mountains, through storms and heat, the last link to her former life. "It's just things, Miss Garrett," Adam said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Things can be replaced." "Not all of them," she replied, thinking of her mother's china tea set, carefully wrapped in quilts in the wagon's bed. "No," he agreed. "Not all." They rode in companionable silence for a time, the rhythm of the horses' hooves lulling Fiona into a contemplative mood. The landscape was nothing like the verdant hills of Massachusetts. Instead, rolling plains stretched to the horizon, interspersed with scrubby trees and rock formations. Yet there was beauty in its wildness, in the endless sky overhead and the distant silhouettes of mesas. "How long have you been in Texas, Mr. Vance?" Fiona asked, breaking the silence. "Going on 8 years now," he replied. "Came after the war, needed somewhere to start fresh." "You fought in the war between the states," his body tensed slightly behind her. "Yes, madam." "Union Army, 20th Massachusetts Infantry." Fiona processed this information with surprise. "You're from Massachusetts, so am I. Boston." "Worcester," he said, "though I don't have much cause to go back." There was something in his tone that discouraged further questions about his past. Instead, Fiona asked, "What do you do in Fort Worth?" "Ranch hand, mostly," he answered. "Work for the Sutton spread north of town. Do some scouting for the cavalry at the fort when they need extra eyes." "Is that what you were doing last night? Scouting?" "No," Adam admitted. "I was headed back to town after delivering a message to a homestead about Indian movements in the territory." He paused. "Lucky for both of us I took that route." "Indeed," Fiona agreed softly. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." Adam didn't respond immediately, and when he did, his voice was gruff with emotion. "Let's just say I've seen enough death to last a lifetime, Miss Garrett. I wasn't about to ride past and find your bones picked clean come morning." The starkness of his words sent a shiver through Fiona, reminding her just how close she had come to a terrible fate. Impulsively, she placed her hand over his where it rested on the reins. "Thank you, Mr. Vance." His hand stiffened momentarily beneath hers before relaxing. "Adam," he corrected. "Out here, formality seems a waste of breath." "Then you must call me Fiona," she replied, withdrawing her hand, suddenly aware of her boldness. "Fiona," he repeated, as if testing the feel of it on his tongue. "It suits you." They stopped at midday to rest the horse and eat a simple meal of jerky and hardtack from Adam's provisions. Fiona's legs ached from the unfamiliar riding position, and she stretched gratefully when her feet touched solid ground. "We're making good time," Adam observed, looking at the sun's position. "Should reach Fort Worth by late afternoon." Fiona nodded, trying to hide her nervousness about arriving in her new home. "I've never met my cousin Madeline. We only corresponded by letter after my parents passed." Adam glanced at her as he offered solace water from his canteen. "Madeline Fleming is a good woman, straight-talking but fair. She'll look after you. You know her well." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "She made the hat I ruined last spring when I fell into Salters Creek, chasing a stray calf. Lectured me for an hour about respecting fine craftsmanship." The image of this tall, serious man being scolded by a milliner made Fiona laugh, the sound bright in the open air. Adam looked startled, then pleased, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that transformed his solemn face. "She sounds formidable," Fiona said, still smiling. "You'll get along fine," he assured her, offering his hand to help her back onto Solace. As they rode, the terrain began to change subtly. More trees appeared along creek beds, and occasionally they passed small homesteads carved from the wilderness. Signs of civilization grew more frequent: fenced pastures, rutted wagon roads, distant smoke from chimneys. By late afternoon, the outskirts of Fort Worth came into view. The town had grown considerably since the Army established the fort in 1849, with the arrival of the railroad in 1873 accelerating its expansion. Still, to Fiona's eyes accustomed to Boston's crowded streets, it seemed hardly more than a village. Main Street bustled with activity, cowboys fresh from cattle drives mingling with merchants, soldiers from the nearby fort, and settlers going about their business. Women in practical frontier dress, so different from the elaborate fashions of Boston, carried baskets or shepherded children through the dusty thoroughfare. Adam guided Solace expertly through the traffic, nodding greetings to people who called his name. Fiona felt increasingly self-conscious about their arrangement, her sitting astride before him. Her skirts hiked scandalously high, but no one seemed to give it a second glance. They stopped before a neat two-story building with Fleming's Millinery painted in elegant script across the front window. The display featured several fashionable hats on wooden stands, arranged with an artistry that would not have been out of place in the finest Boston shops. "Here we are," Adam said, dismounting and reaching up to help Fiona down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground, and Adam's hands tightened on her waist, steadying her. "Careful," he murmured, his face suddenly very close to hers. "Thank you," she breathed, acutely aware of his proximity and the curious glances of passers-by. The shop door opened, and a woman in her late 40s emerged. Her auburn hair, streaked with silver and arranged in a practical coronet, immediately marked her as a relative Fiona had inherited the same shade from her mother's side. Madeline Fleming's sharp eyes took in the scene, her expression cycling rapidly from curiosity to recognition. "Fiona Garrett," she called, approaching quickly. "Heavens, child, we expected you days ago. I was about to send word to the sheriff to watch for you on the roads." Fiona stepped forward, suddenly shy. "Cousin Madeline, I'm sorry for the delay. I had an accident with my wagon yesterday, and if not for Mr. Vance, Adam Vance—" Madeline interrupted, turning her attention to the cowboy who had removed his hat respectfully. "What have you been up to now?" Adam met her scrutiny steadily. "Miss Garrett's wagon broke an axle about 20 miles east, found her surrounded by wolves last night." Madeline's hand flew to her throat. "Good Lord!" She turned back to Fiona, eyes wide. "Are you hurt, my dear?" "No, thanks to Mr. Vance," Fiona assured her. "He stood guard all night and brought me here today." Madeline's expression softened as she looked between them. "Well then, it seems I owe you my gratitude, Adam." She reached out to take Fiona's hands in hers. "And you, my dear, must be exhausted. Come inside at once." Fiona turned to Adam, suddenly reluctant to say goodbye. "My things, I'll bring them in," he promised, already moving to untie her bundles from Solace's saddle. Madeline ushered Fiona into the shop, which smelled pleasantly of fabric, straw, and the subtle scent of lavender. The front room displayed dozens of hats in various stages of completion, while through a doorway Fiona glimpsed living quarters at the back. "You're thin as a rail," Madeline observed, her keen eyes assessing Fiona's condition. "The journey must have been difficult." "I'll fix you something to eat once we get you settled." Adam entered, carrying Fiona's belongings. "Where would you like these, Mrs. Fleming?" "Take them up to the room at the top of the stairs," Madeline directed. "It's all prepared for Fiona." As Adam disappeared up the narrow staircase, Madeline turned to Fiona with raised eyebrows. "So, Adam Vance came to your rescue, did he?" Something in her tone made Fiona blush. "Yes, I don't know what would have become of me if he hadn't appeared when he did." Madeline's expression grew serious. "The frontier can be unforgiving to those who venture out alone, especially women. You were fortunate it was Adam who found you. He's one of the few men in these parts whose word is as good as gold." Adam descended the stairs before Fiona could respond. He retrieved his hat from where he'd placed it on the counter. "Your things are all upstairs, Miss Garrett. I should be going." "Wait," Fiona said quickly. "What about my wagon, my horse?" "I'll speak to Mr. Sutton about sending some men to retrieve what we can," he assured her. Your mare should be fine for a night or two. She has water from the creek and grass aplenty." "I can't ask you to do more than you already have," Fiona protested. Adam's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. "You didn't ask. I offered." He placed his hat on his head, nodding to both women. "Ladies." "Adam," Madeline called as he reached the door. "Sunday dinner, 1 o'clock. I expect to see you." A brief smile touched his lips. "Yes, madam." His eyes met Fiona's one last time before he stepped outside. Through the shop window, Fiona watched him mount Solace and ride away, his straight back and broad shoulders soon disappearing among the crowd on Main Street. A strange emptiness settled in her chest as he vanished from view. "Come," Madeline said gently, placing a hand on Fiona's arm. "Let's get you settled. You can tell me all about your adventure over supper." The next few days passed in a blur of activity as Fiona adjusted to her new life. Madeline's home above the millinery shop was modest but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a small sitting room and a kitchen that doubled as a dining area. Fiona found her cousin to be exactly as Adam had described, straight-talking but fair, with a quick wit and a generous heart beneath her no-nonsense exterior. The millinery business thrived, catering to the wives of ranchers and merchants, as well as the occasional woman of more questionable profession from the saloons near the stockyards. Fiona's experience with fine needlework proved valuable, and she quickly learned the basics of hat-making under Madeline's expert tutelage. On Friday afternoon, a wagon pulled up outside the shop. Fiona looked up from the counter where she was arranging ribbons to see Adam directing 2 men unloading her possessions from her broken wagon. "Adam," she exclaimed, hurrying to the door, "you found everything." He removed his hat as she approached. "Most of it. The wolves made off with anything that smelled of food, and rain got to some of your books, but we salvaged what we could." He gestured to her chestnut mare, tethered behind the wagon. "Your horse is none the worse for the adventure." Fiona's heart swelled with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you." Adam shrugged, seemingly uncomfortable with her appreciation. "No need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Fiona contradicted softly. "They wouldn't have." Their eyes held for a moment before one of the men called Adam's attention to a question about where to place a trunk. Fiona stepped back, allowing them to work, but her gaze kept returning to Adam as he directed the unloading with quiet efficiency. When everything had been brought inside or stored in Madeline's small stable behind the shop, Adam approached Fiona again, hat in hand. "Your wagon's beyond repair," he informed her. "The axle split clean through and the wheels splintered. But Mr. Sutton paid fair price for the hardware, hinges, nails, the good wood. It's not much, but might help you get settled." He offered her a small pouch that clinked with coins. Fiona accepted it, touched by the thoughtfulness. "Please thank Mr. Sutton for me." She hesitated, then added, "And you'll be coming for Sunday dinner, won't you?" A hint of color touched Adam's tanned cheeks. "I expect so if Mrs. Fleming still wants me." "She does," Fiona assured him, though she didn't mention that she'd reminded Madeline of the invitation twice. 1 o'clock. Adam nodded, settling his hat back on his head. "Until Sunday, then." Fiona watched him leave with the same peculiar sense of loss she'd felt the first time, only to find Madeline standing beside her with a knowing smile. "Interesting man, Adam Vance," her cousin remarked casually. Fiona turned away to hide her blush. "He's been very kind." "Kind isn't the word most would use for him," Madeline replied. "Reliable, honorable, perhaps, but Adam keeps to himself, has done ever since he arrived in Fort Worth. Whatever happened to him during the war left its mark." Fiona's curiosity sparked. "Has he never spoken of it?" Madeline shook her head. "Not to me, nor to anyone I know. He came here in '67, worked harder than 3 men put together, never complains, never causes trouble, but there's a darkness in him sometimes." She gave Fiona a sidelong glance. "Until this week, I'd never seen him smile the way he does when he looks at you." "Cousin," Fiona protested, her cheeks burning hotter. Madeline laughed, patting her arm. "Don't worry, dear. Your secret is safe with me. Now help me close up the shop. We've got a chicken to roast and a pie to bake if we're to impress our dinner guest." Sunday arrived clear and mild, perfect early autumn weather. Fiona spent more time than usual on her appearance, selecting a cornflower blue dress that complemented her auburn hair and fair complexion. She arranged her hair in a simpler style than she would have worn in Boston, but still becoming, with soft curls framing her face. "You look lovely," Madeline observed as they prepared the dining table. "Blue suits you." "Thank you," Fiona replied, adjusting the place settings nervously. "Is there anything else we need?" "Just our guest," Madeline said, glancing at the clock which showed 5 minutes to 1. "And he's nothing if not punctual." Sure enough, at precisely 1 o'clock, a knock sounded at the back door leading to the living quarters. Madeline opened it to reveal Adam, clean-shaven and dressed in what was clearly his Sunday best, a dark jacket over a crisp white shirt, his usual worn jeans replaced by wool trousers. "Mrs. Fleming," he greeted, removing his hat. His eyes found Fiona, and something in his expression made her heart flutter. "Miss Garrett, it's Fiona, remember?" she reminded him with a small smile. "Fiona," he corrected, returning her smile with one of his own. Madeline looked between them with satisfaction. "Well, don't just stand there, Adam. Come in. Dinner's nearly ready." The meal was pleasant, with conversation flowing more easily than Fiona had expected. Adam spoke of ranch affairs, the price of cattle, and the changes coming to Fort Worth with the railroad's expansion. Fiona shared stories of Boston and her journey west, carefully avoiding the painful topic of her parents' deaths from influenza the previous winter. After the meal, Madeline insisted on clearing away the dishes herself. "You young people go sit in the parlor," she directed. "Adam, there's a book of photographs on the table that Fiona brought from back east. Perhaps she'll show you." Alone in the small sitting room, Fiona found herself suddenly shy. Adam stood awkwardly by the window, his large frame seeming out of place among the delicate furnishings. "Please, sit," she invited, taking a seat on the sofa and reaching for the photograph album. "These are mostly of Boston and my family." Adam sat beside her, careful to maintain a proper distance. As Fiona turned the pages, explaining the images of stately buildings and formally posed family groups, she was acutely aware of his shoulder nearly touching hers, the clean scent of soap and sunshine that clung to him. "Your parents?" Adam asked, indicating a portrait of a distinguished couple. "Yes," Fiona confirmed, "taken 2 years before they died." She traced her mother's face with a gentle finger. "I never thought I would lose them both so suddenly." "I'm sorry," Adam said quietly. "Losing family is hard." Something in his tone made Fiona look up. "Did you lose someone in the war?" Adam's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. "My brother, at Gettysburg." He stared at the photograph without seeing it. "I was there, but I couldn't save him." The simple statement held such pain that Fiona instinctively placed her hand over his. "I'm so sorry, Adam." He turned his hand to clasp hers briefly before withdrawing. It was a long time ago, but Fiona could see in his eyes that it wasn't not really. Some wounds never fully healed. "Is that why you came west, to leave those memories behind?" "Partly," he admitted. "After Thomas died, I had nothing keeping me in Massachusetts. Our parents had passed years before. The farm was sold to pay debts." His shoulders lifted in a small shrug. When the war ended, I just kept moving west until I found a place that felt right. And Fort Worth is that place." Fiona asked. Adam considered the question, his blue eyes thoughtful. "It has been. Good work, honest people, room to breathe." "But," Fiona prompted, sensing something unspoken. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Perceptive, aren't you?" He glanced toward the kitchen where they could hear Madeline moving about. "Until recently, it was enough. Now I find myself wondering if there might be more to life than just surviving it." The intensity of his gaze as he spoke made Fiona's breath catch. Before she could respond, Madeline returned with coffee, effectively ending the private moment. The afternoon passed pleasantly, and as the sun began to lower toward the horizon, Adam rose to take his leave. "Thank you for dinner, Mrs. Fleming," he said, retrieving his hat from the stand by the door. "Best meal I've had in an age." "You're welcome any time, Adam," Madeline replied warmly. "Isn't he, Fiona?" "Of course," Fiona agreed, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks at her cousin's obvious matchmaking. "I'll walk you out," she offered, following Adam to the back door. Outside, the evening air had grown cool. Adam turned to her, hat in hand. "I enjoyed today," he said simply. "As did I," Fiona replied. "Thank you again for all your help with my things." "I was thinking," Adam began, then paused as if gathering courage. "Fort Worth's having its Harvest Festival next weekend. There's a dance on Saturday night. I wondered if you might like to attend, with me." Fiona's heart leaped at the invitation. "I'd like that very much." The smile that transformed his face was worth any potential scandal of being seen on the arm of a man she'd known less than a week. "I'll call for you at 7 then." "I'll be ready," she promised. Adam hesitated, then reached for her hand, raising it briefly to his lips in a gesture that belonged more to Boston drawing rooms than Texas back porches. "Until Saturday, Fiona." She watched him stride toward the livery where he'd left Solace, his tall figure silhouetted against the sunset. Only when he disappeared from view did she realize she was still standing there with a foolish smile on her face. The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Fiona threw herself into work at the millinery, learning quickly under Madeline's tutelage. She found she had a natural talent for design, and several of her hat creations sold within days of being displayed in the shop window. "You have an eye for color and proportion," Madeline praised as they closed the shop Friday evening. "You'll make an excellent milliner with more experience." "Thank you," Fiona replied, touching a half-finished straw bonnet with satisfaction. "I never thought I'd find such fulfillment in making hats." "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns," her cousin observed. "Speaking of which, have you decided what you're wearing to the dance tomorrow?" Fiona hesitated. "I thought my blue dress." "Nonsense," Madeline declared. "This is your first social event in Fort Worth. You need to make an impression." She smiled mysteriously. "I have something for you upstairs." In Madeline's bedroom, laid carefully across the quilt, was a gown of deep emerald silk. The style was simpler than Boston fashion no bustles or elaborate overskirts, but the quality of the fabric and stitching was undeniable. "Madeline," Fiona breathed, touching the silk reverently. "It's beautiful, but I couldn't possibly. It was meant to be a welcome gift," her cousin interrupted. "I finished the alterations this morning while you were serving customers." Her expression softened. "Your mother would want you to have something pretty for your first dance in your new home." Tears pricked at Fiona's eyes. "Thank you, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll wear it," Madeline replied practically, "and that you'll save me a dance with that handsome cowboy of yours." Fiona laughed through her tears. "He's hardly mine." Madeline's knowing smile suggested she thought otherwise. Saturday evening arrived with Fiona in a flutter of nerves. The emerald gown fit perfectly, highlighting her slender waist and bringing out the green of her eyes. Madeline helped arrange her hair in an elegant knot at the nape of her neck, with a few artful curls left free. "There," her cousin said, stepping back to admire her work. "You're a vision." At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock sounded at the door. Madeline went to answer it while Fiona took a final glance in the mirror, her stomach fluttering with anticipation. When she descended the stairs, Adam was standing in the shop's front room, hat in hand, dressed in a black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. He had clearly visited the barber, his dark hair neatly trimmed, his jaw clean-shaven. When he caught sight of her, he went very still. "Fiona," he said, her name almost a reverence on his lips. "Hello, Adam," she replied softly, reaching the bottom of the stairs. For a moment, they simply looked at each other until Madeline cleared her throat meaningfully. "You two should get going if you want to make the start of the dancing." Adam seemed to shake himself from a trance. "Yes, of course." He offered his arm to Fiona. "Shall we?" The dance was being held in the newly constructed town hall, its windows blazing with light visible from blocks away. The sound of fiddles and a piano drifted into the street, where couples and families made their way toward the celebration. Inside, the large room had been transformed with autumn decorations, dried corn stalks, pumpkins, and paper lanterns strung from the rafters. A small band played at one end of the room, while refreshment tables lined the other. Already dozens of people filled the space, some dancing to a lively reel, others conversing in small groups around the perimeter. "It's wonderful," Fiona said, taking in the festive scene. Adam smiled down at her, a new lightness in his expression. "Wait until you taste Mrs. Havorson's apple cider. It's worth the admission price alone." They made their way through the crowd, Adam nodding greetings to acquaintances. Several people stopped them to be introduced to Fiona, curiosity evident in their expressions as they assessed the newcomer on Adam Vance's arm. Adam rarely attends social gatherings, a friendly woman named Sarah Sutton explained to Fiona as they stood near the refreshment table. "My husband nearly fell off his horse when Adam asked for Saturday evening off for the dance." Fiona glanced at Adam, who was engaged in conversation with Mr. Sutton a few steps away. "He's been very kind since my arrival in town." Sarah's eyes twinkled knowingly. "I'd say it's more than kindness, dear. I've known Adam Vance for 7 years and never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Before Fiona could formulate a response, the band struck up a waltz, and Adam appeared at her side. "May I have this dance?" he asked formally, extending his hand. Fiona placed her fingers in his. "You may." Adam led her onto the floor with surprising grace for such a tall man. His hand at her waist was warm and secure as he guided her into the steps of the waltz. "You dance well," Fiona observed, a little breathless from more than just the movement. "My mother insisted both her sons learn," Adam replied. "Said it was as essential as knowing how to ride or shoot." "She was right," Fiona agreed, following his lead as they turned in perfect time to the music. Adam's eyes never left her face. "You're beautiful tonight, Fiona. That color suits you." "Thank you," she murmured, feeling heat rise to her cheeks at the intensity of his gaze. They danced in silence for several measures, the connection between them growing with each step. Fiona was acutely aware of his hand at her waist, the careful distance he maintained between their bodies, the subtle scent of bay rum aftershave. "People are watching us," she remarked, noticing the curious glances directed their way. "Let them," Adam replied with uncharacteristic lightness. "They're just surprised to see me acting like a normal person for once." "And are you?" Fiona asked. "Acting?" His expression grew serious. "No, for the first time in a very long time I'm not acting at all." The simple honesty of his statement touched her deeply. As the music drew to a close, Adam's hand tightened briefly at her waist before he released her, stepping back to bow formally. "Thank you for the dance," he said. "The pleasure was mine," Fiona replied, meaning it completely. The evening passed in a blur of dances, conversations, and shared laughter. Adam introduced Fiona to what seemed like half the town, from the mayor to the blacksmith. She danced with several other men, including Mr. Sutton and the young doctor who had recently set up practice, but her eyes always sought out Adam's tall figure. Near midnight, as the festivities began to wind down, Adam led her outside for a breath of fresh air. The October night was cool but not uncomfortable, the sky ablaze with more stars than Fiona had ever seen in Boston. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Adam asked as they stood in the relative privacy of the town hall's side portico. "Very much," Fiona assured him. "Everyone has been so welcoming." "Fort Worth folks are good people for the most part," Adam said, leaning against a wooden column. "It's why I stayed." "I'm glad you did," Fiona said softly, meeting his gaze directly. "If you hadn't been here, hadn't found me that night." Adam straightened, moving closer until he stood directly before her. "But I was, and I did." His voice dropped lower. Maybe it was more than luck. Fiona's heart raced at his proximity. "What do you mean?" "I've ridden 100 different trails in the years I've been here," he explained. "Never took that particular route before. Something just told me to go that way that night." His eyes searched hers. "I'm starting to think it might have been Providence." The earnestness in his expression made Fiona bold. "And what does Providence have in mind for us now, do you suppose?" Adam's gaze dropped briefly to her lips. "I'd like to find out if you would." "I would," she whispered for a moment. Fiona thought he might kiss her. Instead, he took her hand in his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. "Then perhaps you'll allow me to call on you properly." "With your cousin's permission, of course." The formal request, so at odds with their dramatic first meeting, made Fiona smile. "I believe Madeline would be delighted." Adam returned her smile, the expression transforming his solemn features. "Then it's settled." He offered his arm. "Shall we return inside? I promised Mrs. Fleming at least one dance." The weeks following the Harvest Festival brought a flurry of changes to Fiona's life. True to his word, Adam called regularly at the millinery shop, sometimes just for brief visits between his duties at the Sutton Ranch, other times for Sunday dinner or to escort Fiona and Madeline to church services. Fort Worth society quickly accepted the courtship as established fact. Though some eyebrows had initially raised at the speed of the attachment, the dramatic tale of wolves and rescue served to romanticize rather than scandalize. If anything, the story enhanced Adam's standing in the community, adding a heroic dimension to his already solid reputation. As November deepened toward winter, Fiona found herself increasingly at home in Fort Worth. The millinery business thrived with holiday orders, and Fiona's designs became sought after by the town's more fashion-conscious ladies. Her Boston background lent an air of sophistication that translated well to the frontier setting when adapted with Madeline's practical guidance. One crisp Saturday afternoon, Adam arrived at the shop just as Fiona was helping the last customer of the day select trimmings for a hat. "I'll be just a moment," she mouthed to him over the customer's shoulder. Adam nodded, content to wait, his tall figure looking somewhat out of place among the feminine surroundings. His patience was rewarded when the sale was completed and the customer departed with her purchase. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Fiona said, moving to lock the door behind the departing woman. "No trouble," Adam replied. "I like watching you work. You have a way with people." Fiona smiled at the compliment. "Did you finish your business at the land office?" Adam had mentioned earlier in the week that he needed to settle some property matters in town. He nodded, something in his expression making Fiona curious. "Successfully, I hope." "Very," he confirmed. "Actually, that's why I'm here. I was hoping you might join me for a ride this afternoon. There's something I'd like to show you." Intrigued, Fiona agreed. "Let me just tell Madeline and get my coat." 20 minutes later, they were riding out of town, Adam on Solace and Fiona on her mare, Penny. The day was clear and cold, the late autumn sun casting long shadows across the rolling landscape. Adam led them north along the Trinity River for several miles before turning west on a less traveled trail. "Where are we going?" Fiona asked as they crested a small rise. "Almost there," Adam replied, a hint of nervousness in his usually confident demeanor. They rounded a bend in the trail and a small valley opened before them. At its center, near a stand of oak trees, stood a modest homestead, a sturdy log cabin with a stone chimney, a small barn, and a corral. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney, suggesting someone was in residence. "Whose place is this?" Fiona asked as they approached. Adam drew Solace to a halt before the cabin. "Mine, as of this morning." Fiona turned to him in surprise. "Yours? But I thought you lived at the Sutton Ranch." "I did," Adam confirmed, dismounting and coming to help her down from Penny. "I've been saving for years. This parcel came up for sale when old Jim Harker decided to move back east to live with his daughter." He hesitated, then added, "I thought it was time I had a place of my own." There was something in his tone that made Fiona's pulse quicken. "It looks lovely." Adam's eyes held hers. "Would you like to see inside?" The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall with a cooking area to one side. A solid wooden table with 4 chairs occupied the center of the main room, while a curtained alcove presumably led to sleeping quarters. Everything was scrupulously clean, with fresh curtains at the windows and a colorful quilt draped over a rocking chair by the fire. "Mrs. Sutton helped get it ready," Adam explained, seeing Fiona's surprise at the homey touches. "She said no woman would be impressed by a bachelor's idea of decoration." "It's perfect," Fiona assured him, warming her hands at the fire. "But it seems a long way to ride from town each day to the Sutton Ranch." Adam moved to stand beside her, his expression serious. "I won't be working for the Suttons much longer. Starting in the spring, I'll be running my own cattle. It's just 50 acres, but the grazing's good and there's plenty of water." He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about the future a lot lately." Fiona's heart began to race. "Have you?" "Yes." Adam took her hands in his blue eyes earnest. "Fiona, I know we've known each other only a short time, but I can't imagine my life without you in it." His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms. "I love you. I think I started falling for you that first night, watching you sleep by the fire, so brave despite everything." Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. "Oh, Adam, I'm not a man of fancy words," he continued, his voice roughened with emotion. "But I can promise to cherish you, protect you, and work every day to make you happy." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small ring with a modest diamond. "Fiona Garrett, will you marry me?" Joy bubbled up within Fiona, as bright and unexpected as a spring in the desert. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Adam's face transformed with a smile of such radiant happiness that it nearly took her breath away. With slightly trembling hands, he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his embrace. Their first kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, a question asked and answered in the press of lips. The second was deeper, a seal on the promises made between them. Fiona's arms wound around Adam's neck as he held her close, his strength enveloping her in safety and warmth. When they finally separated, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "I was so afraid you'd say it was too soon." Fiona smiled up at him. "Perhaps by Boston standards, but this isn't Boston, and I'm not the same person who left there." She touched his cheek tenderly. "Some things don't need years to know they're right." They stayed at the cabin until late afternoon, sitting before the fire, planning their future together. Adam would continue preparing the homestead through the winter while Fiona helped Madeline train a new assistant at the millinery. They would marry in the spring, when the wildflowers bloomed across the Texas plains. "Madeline will be overjoyed," Fiona predicted as they rode back toward town in the gathering dusk. "She's been hoping for this since the day you brought me to Fort Worth." Adam chuckled. "I suspect half the town has been expecting it. Mrs. Sutton's been dropping hints about wedding quilts for weeks." The town was quiet as they returned, most businesses closed for the evening. Light spilled from the windows of the millinery shop's living quarters, where Madeline awaited their return. Adam helped Fiona dismount, then took her hand. "Shall we share our news?" Fiona nodded, happiness making her light-headed. "Yes, though I doubt it will be much of a surprise." As predicted, Madeline's response to their announcement was joyful but hardly shocked. "It's about time," she declared, embracing them both. "I was beginning to think I'd need to lock you two in the storeroom to get a proposal." Winter descended on Fort Worth with unusual severity that year. December brought freezing rain that coated everything in treacherous ice, followed by snow that lingered in shaded areas for weeks. January ushered in bone-chilling cold that froze water troughs solid and made travel hazardous at best. Despite the weather, Adam made the journey to town at least twice a week, sometimes staying overnight in Madeline's spare room when conditions were too dangerous for the return trip. The time spent in close quarters only strengthened the bonds between the three of them, with Madeline treating Adam like the son she'd never had. Work on the homestead progressed slowly but steadily. Adam added a lean-to kitchen at the back of the cabin and began construction of a larger barn that would accommodate more livestock. With each improvement, he consulted Fiona, eager for her input on what would soon be their shared home. "The bedroom needs more windows," she suggested during one planning session at Madeline's kitchen table, "for cross-ventilation in summer." Adam nodded, adding notes to his rough sketches. "And we'll need a proper root cellar before next winter." Fiona smiled at his practical considerations. "What about a garden plot? My mother always grew herbs and vegetables." "There's good soil near the creek," Adam confirmed, "protected from the north wind by that stand of cottonwoods." Their conversations ranged from practical matters to dreams for the future children they hoped for. Improvements to the land, even the possibility of expanding the house as their family grew. Each shared plan strengthened their connection, building a foundation as solid as the one beneath their future home. February brought a brief thaw, allowing increased activity throughout the region. Cattle that had survived the harsh conditions needed attention, and the promise of spring spurred ranchers to prepare for the coming season. Adam's visits grew less frequent as he divided his time between finishing work for the Suttons and preparing his own land. Fiona understood the necessity, but missed him keenly during the long stretches between his appearances. "Absence makes the heart grow fonder," Madeline observed one evening as Fiona peered out the shop window for the third time in an hour. "Though I'd say your heart is fond enough already." Fiona smiled ruefully. "Is it that obvious, my dear? You light up like a lantern whenever that man walks through the door," her cousin replied affectionately. "It's quite heartwarming to witness." The wedding was set for the first Saturday in April, to be held in Fort Worth's small church, with a celebration afterward at the Sutton Ranch. Preparations consumed much of Fiona's time when she wasn't working at the millinery sewing her wedding dress, planning the simple ceremony, and preparing to move her belongings to the homestead. March arrived with its characteristic unpredictability, alternating between spring-like warmth and sudden, violent storms. The last of these struck with particular ferocity in the third week of the month, dropping temperatures dramatically and bringing howling winds that rattled windows and sent debris flying through Fort Worth streets. Fiona and Madeline huddled near the stove in their living quarters, listening to the storm rage outside. It was Adam's regular visiting day, but neither woman expected him to brave such conditions. "He'll have his hands full with the stock," Madeline said practically. "This kind of weather is hard on young calves." Fiona nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course. I just hope everyone's safe out there." As the evening wore on, the storm intensified rather than abating. Wind-driven sleet pelted the windows and the temperature plummeted further. Madeline had just suggested they retire early when a pounding at the back door startled them both. "Who on earth?" Madeline began, rising to answer. Adam stood on the porch, his coat crusted with ice, his face reddened by cold and wind. "Evening, ladies," he managed through chattering teeth. "Adam Vance, you fool," Madeline exclaimed, pulling him inside. "What are you doing out in this weather?" "Promised Fiona I'd come," he replied simply. Removing his ice-encrusted hat, Fiona rushed forward, helping him out of his frozen outer garments. "You could have waited until the storm passed." "I would have understood." Adam's blue eyes, bright against his wind-burned face, met hers. "Wanted to make sure you were both all right. Storm's worse out of town." The simple statement of concern warmed Fiona from within. This was the essence of the man she loved: steadfast, reliable, putting others before himself without fanfare or expectation of gratitude. "You'll stay the night," Madeline declared in a tone that brooked no argument. "I'll make up the spare room while Fiona gets you something hot to drink." Later, when Adam had been warmed, fed, and settled in the small bedroom off the kitchen, Fiona paused at his door to bid him good night. "You shouldn't have risked it," she chided gently. Adam, sitting on the edge of the narrow bed, reached for her hand. "I gave my word I'd be here. Besides," he added with a faint smile, "I needed to see you." Fiona's heart swelled with love for this quiet, determined man. "I needed to see you too." She bent to kiss him quickly, mindful of Madeline's presence in the next room. "Sleep well, I love you." "Love you too," he murmured, his eyes following her as she slipped from the room. The storm finally broke the next day, leaving behind a transformed landscape. Trees had lost branches, fences were down in places, and debris littered the streets. Reports trickled in of damaged outbuildings and scattered livestock throughout the county. Adam departed after breakfast, eager to check on his homestead and animals. "I'll be back in a few days," he promised Fiona. "Sooner if I can manage it." The days passed with agonizing slowness. Fiona threw herself into wedding preparations to distract from her worry, but her thoughts constantly turned to Adam, facing the storm's aftermath alone on their future home. 4 days after the storm, as Fiona was closing the shop for the evening, a rider appeared outside. Her heart leaped in anticipation, only to fall when she recognized not Adam but young Theo Jenkins from the Sutton Ranch. "Miss Garrett," the boy called, dismounting. "Mr. Sutton sent me to fetch you and Mrs. Fleming. It's Mr. Vance, he's been hurt." The world seemed to tilt beneath Fiona's feet. "Hurt? How badly? What happened?" "Barn roof collapsed under the weight of ice," Theo explained. "He was trying to get the livestock out. Doc Riley's with him at the Sutton place now." Madeline appeared behind Fiona, having overheard. "We'll come immediately. Give us 5 minutes to gather what we need." The ride to the Sutton Ranch was the longest of Fiona's life. Every hoofbeat seemed to echo her fear that she might lose Adam before their life together had truly begun, that the happiness she'd found might be snatched away as suddenly as it had appeared. Sarah Sutton met them at the door, her kind face drawn with concern. "He's in the back bedroom. Doc Riley's with him now." "How bad is it?" Fiona asked, already moving in the direction indicated. "Broken legs, some ribs too, and a nasty cut on his head," Sarah replied. "He was pinned under a beam for nearly a day before one of our hands found him. Lost a fair amount of blood, and the cold didn't help." Fiona's heart clenched at the thought of Adam trapped and alone, possibly believing help would never come. She quickened her pace, Madeline close behind. "Dr. Riley," a competent young physician who had settled in Fort Worth the previous summer, was just emerging from the bedroom when they arrived. "Miss Garrett," he greeted her, "I was about to send for you." "How is he?" Fiona asked urgently. "Stable," Dr. Riley assured her. "The legs set clean break, thankfully. 3 ribs cracked, but not dangerously so. The head wound is my main concern. He was unconscious when they found him, and he's been drifting in and out since then." "May I see him?" the doctor nodded. "Of course. He's been asking for you in his lucid moments. Just try not to excite him. Rest is what he needs most now." Adam lay still and pale against the pillows, his strong frame looking somehow diminished by injury and confinement. A white bandage encircled his head, and his left leg was splinted and elevated. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow but regular. Fiona approached the bed silently, her heart in her throat. She reached out tentatively to touch his hand, noting with concern how cool his skin felt. Adam's eyelids fluttered at her touch, then opened. For a moment his gaze was unfocused, then recognition dawned. "Fiona," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'm here," she assured him, taking his hand in both of hers. "Lie still. You're going to be all right." A ghost of his usual smile touched his lips. "Sorry about this." "Hush," Fiona scolded gently. "You have nothing to apologize for. The wedding," he persisted, "might need to postpone." Fresh tears threatened at his concern for their plans despite his condition. "The wedding can wait until you're well," she told him firmly. "That's all that matters." Adam's eyes drifted closed again, but his fingers tightened briefly around hers. "Love you," he murmured before sleep claimed him once more. "I love you too," Fiona whispered, settling into the chair beside his bed. "And I'm not going anywhere." She kept that promise through the long night that followed, dozing occasionally, but never leaving his side. Madeline brought food she couldn't eat and tea that grew cold in the cup. Dr. Riley returned near midnight to check Adam's condition, pronouncing him holding his own with cautious optimism. Dawn was breaking when Adam stirred again, his eyes clearer than before. "You're still here," he observed, his voice stronger. "Of course I am," Fiona replied, leaning forward to smooth his hair back from the bandage. "How do you feel?" "Like I lost an argument with a barn," he admitted with a weak attempt at humor. "Thirsty?" Fiona helped him sip water from a glass, supporting his head gently. "Better," Adam nodded slightly, wincing at the movement. "What's the damage?" "Broken leg, cracked ribs, and a head injury," Fiona reported, trying to keep her tone matter-of-fact. "Dr. Riley says you'll recover fully, but it will take time." A shadow crossed Adam's face. "The homestead is being looked after," Fiona assured him. "Mr. Sutton sent men to check on your stock and make temporary repairs to the barn. Everything's under control." "Not how I planned our start together," Adam said ruefully. Fiona squeezed his hand. "Plans change. We'll adapt." Recovery was slow and often frustrating for Adam, who chafed at his enforced idleness. The Suttons insisted he remain at their ranch until he was strong enough to manage on his own, an arrangement that allowed Fiona to visit daily while continuing to help Madeline at the millinery. April arrived with Adam still confined to bed most of the day, though he had progressed to sitting in a chair by the window for short periods. Their wedding date passed unmarked except for a private moment when Fiona brought a small bouquet of wild bluebonnets to his room. "Rain check?" Adam asked, holding the flowers carefully. "As many as you need," Fiona promised, kissing him gently. By mid-May, Adam had graduated to crutches, moving slowly but with increasing confidence. Dr. Riley pronounced him well enough to return to his own homestead, provided he had adequate help. "I'll stay with him," Fiona declared when the doctor delivered this news. "Before you're married?" Madeline asked, raising an eyebrow. Fiona lifted her chin. "Yes, I'll sleep in the lean-to kitchen if propriety demands it, but I won't have him alone out there while he's still recovering." To her surprise, Madeline nodded approval. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that. I've already packed your things." At Fiona's startled look, she added, "What? I've never been one for unnecessary conventions. The man nearly died, for heaven's sake. He needs his future wife more than Fort Worth needs gossip." And so it was arranged. On a perfect May morning, Adam and Fiona left the Sutton Ranch in a wagon driven by one of the hands, bound for their homestead. Madeline followed in a second wagon containing Fiona's belongings and supplies for the coming weeks. The homestead looked much as Fiona remembered it, though the barn showed evidence of recent repairs. The cabin itself had been unharmed by the storm, and inside she found evidence of careful preparation: fresh bedding, stocked pantry, even wildflowers in a jar on the table. "Sarah Sutton's work," Adam explained as he lowered himself carefully into a chair. "She's been planning this for days." Fiona surveyed the cozy space that would soon be their home together. "It's perfect." The next few weeks established a pattern that would carry them through Adam's recovery. Fiona took over management of the small herd with help from a neighboring rancher's son, while Adam directed operations from the porch when his strength allowed. Together they planned the garden, discussed improvements to the cabin, and watched spring unfold across their land. At night, true to her word to Madeline, Fiona slept in the lean-to kitchen while Adam occupied the cabin's single bed. The arrangement tested both their patience and resolve, but as Adam's health improved, so did their anticipation of the life they would soon share fully. June brought warm days and cool nights, perfect weather for a wedding. With Adam now able to walk short distances without crutches, they set a new date: the summer solstice, when daylight would linger long into the evening for their celebration. The ceremony, when it finally arrived, was everything they had hoped for. The small church in Fort Worth overflowed with well-wishers, ranchers, and townspeople. The Suttons and their hands, Madeline's customers, and many others whose lives had intersected with Adam's or Fiona's. Fiona wore a gown of ivory silk, simple but elegant, with Madeline's finest lace adorning the bodice and sleeves. Adam stood tall and straight at the altar, only a slight stiffness in his posture betraying his recent injuries. When their eyes met as Fiona walked down the aisle, the love that passed between them was palpable to everyone present. The celebration afterward at the Sutton Ranch lasted well into the night. There was music and dancing, though Adam limited himself to one careful waltz with his bride, abundant food and heartfelt toasts to the couple's happiness. As the evening stars appeared, Adam and Fiona slipped away in a buggy decorated with ribbons and wildflowers, bound for their homestead, their home at last in every sense of the word. The summer passed in a haze of happiness as they settled into married life. Adam's strength returned fully with Fiona's care, and the passing months. The small herd prospered, and the garden yielded its first modest harvest. They added a proper bedroom to the cabin and began work on a second for the family they hoped to start. In late September, as the first hint of autumn tinged the air, Adam and Fiona sat on their porch after supper, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Almost a year," Fiona observed, leaning against her husband's shoulder. Adam's arm tightened around her. "Best year of my life, despite everything." "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "When the wolves were circling my broken wagon?" "Often," Adam admitted. "I still wonder what made me take that trail home." Fiona smiled up at him. "Providence, remember?" Adam bent to kiss her softly. "Providence, luck, fate, whatever it was, I'm grateful every day." In the distance, a wolf howled a lonely sound carrying across the darkening plains. Another answered, then a third, their voices blending in ancient harmony. "They're still out there," Fiona remarked, shivering slightly despite the mild evening. "Yes," Adam agreed, drawing her closer, "but so are we, together." As night fell fully around their small homestead, a lamp glowed golden in the window, a beacon of warmth and love in the vast Texas wilderness. Inside, a man who had once thought himself beyond healing and a woman who had risked everything for a new beginning built their life together. Day by day, season by season, their bond forged in that first desperate night when the wolves circled and a brave cowboy stood guard until dawn. Years passed, and their family grew, first a son named Thomas, after Adam's fallen brother, then twin daughters who inherited their mother's auburn hair and their father's determined spirit. The homestead expanded to match their growing family and prosperity, with a larger house eventually replacing the original cabin, though they kept it standing as a reminder of their beginnings. Each October, on the anniversary of their first meeting, Adam and Fiona would sit on their porch after the children were asleep and listen for the wolves. Their howls grew more distant with each passing year as civilization steadily encroached on the wild places. But on still nights, if they listened carefully, they could hear the echoes of that fateful night when destiny had brought them together on a lonely Texas trail. And sometimes, when the first autumn chill touched the air, Adam would take out his rifle and clean it with meticulous care, a ritual that needed no explanation between them, a silent acknowledgement of how close they had come to never finding each other at all, and how precious was the life they had built from that precarious beginning. "Worth standing guard all night?" Fiona would ask with a smile, already knowing the answer, and Adam would take her hand, his blue eyes still capable of making her heart skip a beat after all their years together. "For a lifetime with you, I'd do it all again in a heartbeat."